Okay, tonight we are also honoring our BFA majors who have submitted their second year portfolios and been approved for continuation in the creative writing program. These students will be completing or have completed their 2000 level creative writing courses and submitted creative work and a personal narrative that was assessed by creative writing instructors. And we are delighted to present those approved. So I will call you each up by name. If you come on up, get your certificate. And then if you haven't gotten your goodie in the back, we can do that at the end. But please stay up here, and then when everyone's up, we will give a round of applause. All right. Allison Lopez. Alasia Harris. Amelia Simmons. Elias Calloway. Alicia Casabon. Grace Hopp. Rose Nulon. Natasha Knowlton. And Ray McKee. Please, round of applause for our BFA. Thank you all. Again, if you didn't get your gift, you can grab that off the back table. And I will turn it over to start our reading.
Hey everybody.
Hi.
Hi. So I'm introing Sid tonight. I'm super excited to be doing so. I wrote a little something about it. In the year that I've gotten to know Sid, she's proven that she is both a badass person and a badass writer. Yase was originally going to introduce her, but I fought him for it. It was a bloody and brutal battle. I came out victorious. And I agreed to put some of his words in here. So here's what Yase was going to say before I took it from him in a brutal manner. Movement, momentum, action, mystery, intrigue, assassins, worlds beyond ours, the realness in the fantasy. To read Sid's work is to experience those sensations, to be lost in them, and to never want to find your way out of the rabbit hole. In my own words, Sid is an awesome imaginative writer who crafts worlds of bird moms, tech-bending great old ones, and talking cats. She has a finished draft of her novel already and has given our workshop the pleasure of seeing it. Sid is also an artist who commands her work with creativity and skill. By reach out to her if you're interested in some character commissions. Sid's writing impresses me endlessly. It is so creative. It brings fantasy worlds to life in a way that makes me feel like I am reading a better Hunger Games, a better like every YA that I grew up obsessed with. And I'm happy to see somebody in our program writing that kind of stuff that I love so much and I still love so much. Also, the most fashionable person in the room despite my best efforts. So, Sid, if you want to come up and do some reading.
Hi. Hi, I got introduced. Wow, that's pretty cool. Thank you so much. That was incredible. So before we get started, there are some QR codes on the wall. Can you guys hear me also? Do I need to be this close? Oh, okay. Please don't break. Please don't break. Please don't break. Is this good?
That's good.
Okay. There are some QR codes on the walls. If God loves me, those will take you to my reading. So you can read along with me if you would like. I'm really nervous, so I'm sorry if I go fast. Cool. This is one of the first chapters from my novel. This is the first chapter that's from this character's perspective, so you shouldn't really need any context beyond what's going to happen here. So without further ado, we'll get into it. Admin was up with her tea on the day she received the contract. She sat cross-legged on the floor of her pitiful apartment, balancing a kettle in her hands as she heated the water inside with magic, a spell so simple she hardly needed to think about it as it happened. Tea was an excellent drink. It had flavor and took up space in her body, so Edwin could convince herself that she'd eaten something filling enough to carry her through her mornings and afternoons before she allowed herself to find dinner at the cheapest tavern in the city. Any coin she could save was sent to her mother overseas in Voskar. The leaves finished steeping, and someone knocked briskly at her door. It was Harry, the handler of Central Etrajan's branch of the Adventurers Guild. She liked Harry. "Sorry to disturb you at your home, Theros," he said. Last names were first names to Harry, too busy organizing files to bother learning more than one. "It's not a problem." Edwin cradled her tea. For anyone else in the guild, she'd be apprehensive, but this was Harry. He was timid enough that she felt a sort of one-sided kinship with him from afar. Last night, the guild had a visitor from Candlelight. He fiddled with the gold-embroidered leaves on his tunic and settled his bespectacled gaze a little to the left of her head. He had a contract he wanted done, but he twisted his hands together. It was a little odd, to be honest. Could I come in? Adwin stepped back. Her apartment was dark inside, little more than room for a bed, the spell books she'd collected from her studies at Candlelight University, and whatever other sparse belongings she'd scraped together since moving to Kusai for school when she was 18. A tiny window perched opposite to the door and let a little golden squirt of sun into the room. Harry stood awkwardly next to a stack of books and looked at his shoes. "He wanted you specifically," he said. "He wouldn't let me file the contract with the guild." "Why me?" she asked. Her heart jumped at that particular detail, at the possibility of being important, valuable. "He said because you're a Candlelight alum. I told him we have other graduates in the guild, but he asked for you by name." Edwin grunted and took a sip of her tea. "Who placed the request?" "One of the archivists, Lefur." Edwin perked up. She knew him. Garen Lefur was perhaps the only archivist who had any business teaching. His class, Expertise in Elemental Technique, was more fun and far less stressful than any others Edwin had taken, not just because elemental magic was her specialization. She felt like she'd actually learned in his class as opposed to the others that she'd merely drifted through. "I know him. Did he want me to come to his office?" "Yes, but..." Harry looked at her directly for a moment. "Isn't it weird that he wouldn't just place the request through the guild?" Edwin shrugged. It was odd, but it was also Garen, so she doubted the oddness was due to ill intentions. Maybe he'd have something good, like some sort of well-paying nepotism reward for being a graduate. Gods knew she needed it. She reassured Harry that it was fine. He sighed. "If you trust him, then it's up to you." He looked at her like he was calculating his words. "Just don't get into too much trouble. If it looks bad, you should turn it down." She told him that she would watch out for herself, and Harry bowed out of her apartment with a few pleasantries, leaving for the guild hall. Edwin sipped her tea in the new, exciting silence of her apartment. She wondered what Garen wanted. The dodging of guild processes was strange, but so was the fact that he placed the request himself. The archivists sat at the head of the school and taught infrequently. Most of their work involved managing the Candlelight Library's magical archive of tomes and artifacts. The way they spoke of Kusai, the city neighboring the library, Adwin assumed they never left Candlelight for anything. This contract had to be something weird that made Garen come down from his tower. And weird would perhaps mean dangerous, which would also mean expensive. At least Adwin hoped so. The dangers of the adventuring business no longer frightened her. For the 2 years following her graduation, she'd been on back-to-back contracts, exterminating monsters that got too close to cities and, on occasion, rogue wizards using their magic to sow chaos where they could. She stopped in Kusai only to rest and send as much of her earnings as she could back home to Berkun, to her mother. She was confident that she could work around the sharp teeth of whatever she was up against. What worried her was the pay. She had yet to run into a contract that paid enough for Rowan Winterbourne. He was the head of one of the 5 remaining exalted noble families in Voskar, meant to assist the royal family with governing. It had been Berkhoon's bitter wraith for as long as Adwin could remember. He held lavish parties while his citizens struggled to buy food and enforced citywide curfews with the leniency of a guillotine blade. Lamentably, his wealth made him the only place her mother could turn when the rising Voskarian civil war threw her and Adwin's future into question, and he made sure to spare them no expense. 20 gold pieces in 20 years' time for her family's shop and the rooms above in which they lived, courtesy of Adwin's father's heroic death in service to the city and her mother's willingness to embarrass herself on the steps of the Winterbourne Manor. The debt would have been manageable had it not been for the inflation caused by the Civil War. They had 2 gold pieces left to pay and less than a year to find them. Adwin was almost sure Winterbourne knew that would happen, hungry as he was to spread suffering to every corner of the city he could reach. As such, Garen's weirdness was promising. It might help close that gap. She moved to get dressed, excited to go on another contract. Contracts meant more money, of course, but they were also the only time she allowed herself to eat more than 1 meal a day. Only once had Adwin made the mistake of working on an empty stomach. She passed her fingers over the jagged fractal scar on her right shoulder that she'd acquired from a rogue mage, too exhausted and unfocused to block his lightning spell. The skin was pink and raised, like a cat's eternally arched back, a warning etched into her body. The next time you slip on contract work, you might not get lucky again. She grabbed her mage's coat, a light billowy garment with an enormous hood that she had received upon graduation. It was black with gold accents, different from the students' blue and white robes. Adwin liked the way it matched her hair, which she'd kept in a short slanted bob since she'd moved away from Voskar, and the wide hood meant that her pointed elf ears didn't tug against the fabric when she turned her head. It would also get her through the library gates into Garen's office with little hassle. She headed out. Candlelight sat west of the city, in the center of Kusai's farmland where it had teleported to about 20 years ago. Originally, it had been in Voskar, but when the Civil War began, the archivists had activated the building's magical defenses and moved it away from the conflict. As such, it looked vastly different from Kusai. Cold gray stone walls, tall pointed towers, billowing banners bearing Candlelight's blue, white, and gold. Compared to the soft curves, delicate attention to detail, and warmer colors in Etrajani architecture, Candlelight was draconian. Adwin felt a sense of returning home as she stepped through the gates. Inside was the library's large green campus. The faculty tower was north, so Adwin trekked through the grounds, following familiar stonework paths and passing through the crowd of students. She kept her eye out for Ray or any other familiar faces, though it was a useless effort. They had all since graduated. Still, she couldn't help but check their usual haunts. The gazebo closest to the central library building, in the shadows of the student tower buttresses, beneath the large oak tree in the northeast yard. Of course they weren't there, but if they were, she wanted to pretend like she didn't see them. Inside the faculty tower, she checked in with the secretary who was expecting her, and then rode an elevation platform to the highest floors where the archivist's suites were. She had only been here once before, to get a seal of recommendation for her application to the Adventurers Guild. It was much the same now as it was then, cold and efficient. Garen's office had also changed very little. It was warmer than the faculty tower proper, with large, elegant windows, leafy potted plants, and tan orange wallpaper. Tall bookshelves huddled in one corner of the room, stacked with tomes and trinkets, and Garen's enormous desk sat in the back atop a huge, intricately woven red rug. Garen himself stood off to the side, just as Adwin remembered him. A wiry, pale hand held contemplatively to his chin, human ears tinged pink. He was wearing his usual flowing blue and gold archivist's robes. Adwin had always preferred her own knee-length black coat to the archivist's floor-length gowns from a past age. Perhaps that suited Garen, though. Regular practice of arcane magic slowed the aging process, so his short gray hair hadn't crept any further away from his forehead since last she saw him. By Adwin's estimate, he must have been a little over 100 years old. He stood inspecting a large magical globe, the sort that reflected real weather and cloud formations all over the planet. The library had several for student use, but it stood to reason that the archivists would be privileged to their own private globes as well. Adwin had always found them absurdly fun to watch and play with. Garen turned away from the globe upon her arrival. "Adwin," he said, his face impassive. "So that handler did speak to you." Adwin nodded. Garen lifted a few pages of parchment from his desk, looked them over, and sighed. "How have you found the Adventurers Guild these past 2 years?" "Fine," Adwin said. "Haven't been killed yet." Good, good. Garen held the parchment close to his chest, as if guarding a hand of cards. "I can imagine the questions you have about this contract. Before we get into the details, though, there are some conditions you must agree to. Adwin kept a stolid expression. She was excited to be back and to be of some use to one of her favorite professors, but that statement struck an odd chord. What sort of conditions? To start, this contract will be handled outside of the Adventurers Guild's jurisdiction. Garen fingered the edges of the parchment. We will do our best to offer the same aid the Guild provides, but due to candlelight policy, the details of this contract must be kept within the library's records, not outsourced. Why not just request a copy of the records from the Guild? Edwin crossed her arms. Guild regulations acted as a shield between adventurers and their contractors, in part to keep them from being held responsible for any damages caused during the completion of contracts, but also for reimbursing family if an adventurer died on the job. Garen was watching her, holding tight to his parchment, hiding something. It would probably be a bad idea to ask what outright. Besides, she didn't want to believe that Garen would be malicious to her on purpose. This contract is of sensitive nature, he frowned. It involves private matters that Candlelight doesn't want in the Guild's hands. Edwin gripped the sleeves of her coat, and Garen fanned himself with his parchment. We will be paying far above Guild rates to compensate, however. Library secret. Interesting, but suspicious. Maybe this is why Garen had been after a Candlelight alum, out of some hope that loyalty to the school would overshadow loyalty to the Guild. Perhaps what they wanted her to do was illegal in Etrajan. The Guild's branches were bound by whatever country's law they were set in. Maybe it would upset the Council of Mages, the global regulators of magical practice. Even so, she had come here hoping to be paid above Guild rates, which weren't going to be enough to settle the Winterborn's debt on time. How much more? She asked. The contract is for 2 gold pieces, upon completion, of course. Edwin's pulse quickened. There was no way she wasn't walking into some sort of trap. But set by Garen? It was plausible that he knew about the debt. She never told him specifically that the information was out there. So this contract could be leverage. Leverage for what, though? Perhaps Harry was right. That's a lot of money, she said. What's the contract for? Garen smiled, pulling well-worn laugh lines taut. I can't tell you until you accept it. He strode to the other side of his desk, passing behind his large, cozy-looking chair, and placed the stack of parchment face down next to a pitcher of water. I know how this all looks. I wish it were easier for me to ask this of you, but we've our backs to the fire here. The other archivists have forbidden me from giving you any specifics on this job. All you can know is that the compensation will make up for everything. Of course it would. It was probably designed to lure her in. Edwin was sure whatever this contract was, it was illegal. What she wasn't sure of was if she would be willing to risk arrest to escape Winterborn's wrath. And why do you want me specifically to do this? Suspicion aside, she was still curious about that. As far as she knew, she was a normal mage, nothing extraordinary about her or her casting skills. Was it just that she was desperate, or did he see something else in her worth using? Garen stumbled through his words as if he hadn't expected the question. You showed promise under my tutelage, but aren't there others? He kept his gaze lowered to his desk. There are, but you outshone them. The head archivist remembered your performance in your exit exam. Edwin was taken aback for a moment. That fieriness. She'd nearly forgotten. She supposed that under the right conditions, she could be more dangerous than the average wizard. That is all I'm permitted to discuss, Garen said. You're allowed time to mull it over if you'd like. Just come back within the week. With that, Edwin felt as if a door were closing on her. None of this was right. Garen had never been so cagey when she was a student. It was what made him better at his job than the other archivists, who guarded their arcane knowledge like it was their birthright. Edwin wondered now if Garen was really her friend, or if he had just put on a friendly facade for her in class. She pressed her fingertips down on the edge of his desk and eyed over a small potted cactus growing amidst colorful feather quills and ink bottles. Harry was right. This contract was bad, and his advice to turn it down was looking more sensible by the second. But could she really afford to leave without it? Her earliest memory was of her mother sobbing gobs of snot under Roan Winterborn's shoes when she was 4, begging him to buy their home so she wouldn't have to leave the safety of the city in the midst of a war and endanger her young daughter. Edwin had watched her face twist with agony and thought, I will remember this. And so it was branded into the annals of her mind. Her mother spent the rest of her life working nonstop to pay off those 20 gold pieces, keeping Edwin as alive as she could in the meantime, only to fall short just shy of the finish line. Winterborn would snatch up the house and exile her from the city. She had no savings and would be without any means to work. All for her. All for Adwin. I'll do it, but if I die, you're sending those gold pieces to my mother. Garen didn't smile, he just nodded. That can be arranged. There was a hollowness to his voice, a sort of unexcitement that confused Adwin. We'll need to do one more thing. He approached her and extended a hand. It shifted and trembled with magical energy, leaving after images of itself as it moved. A binding spell. You will not be able to speak of what we discuss in this room with anyone else if you shake my hand. Your participation is voluntary. Adwin forgot her confusion at his tone and stared at it, apprehensive. It had to be psychomancy, powerful psychomancy. Her fingers twitched. The study of psychomancy was heavily restricted by the Council of Mages. In the wrong hands, it could be devastating, used to influence the minds of others. But of course Garen knew it, he was an archivist. How do I know that's really what the spell does? You don't. Garen's face remained emotionless. Unless you can cast a truth-binding spell, that is. You have to trust me. I'm offering you a chance to step away, and in the event that my intentions are bad, you have at least one person who knows where you are right now. He must have meant Harry. If Garen was out to control her, at least Harry would be able to vouch for her innocence afterward. That would have to be enough. Garen waited, gray eyebrows pressed up into his forehead. Adwin reminded herself that she had little choice here. She grabbed his hand, and they shook twice. With each shake, she felt a blooming pressure in her head, like the ringing of a great bell. Garen's office appeared like his hand had, leaving trails of itself in her vision as she swayed under the effect of the spell. Then it stopped. She steadied herself on the edge of the desk, and a cup of water appeared in front of her. Drink, Garen said. He held a cup of his own and the pitcher that was on his desk. Adwin took it. She was unbelievably thirsty, she realized. Was that also the spell? She chugged the water, and the dizziness abated, little by little. Someone has stolen a very dangerous magical tome from our highest level archive, Garen said. He was unnervingly serious, even more than he was before. It's imperative that we retrieve it before something disastrous happens. It wasn't a crime. Adwin wasn't sure what crime Candlelight would even find worth committing, what crime that would involve her at least, but this was a surprise. I thought you were going to ask me to do something illegal. Garen made an awkward, bleating laugh sound like a sheep. No, he said, and then stared a second longer before resuming. We aren't sure how it was stolen. The archive it was taken from is restricted, archivist-only access. But we've done tests with truth-binding spells, and none of us removed it. What kind of magic is it? Adwin asked. Garen frowned. Old magic, the sort that shouldn't be used. He waited for her to follow him and walked back to his globe. It was centered on Atria, the territory south of Voskar. He pointed at the middle of it, just beneath a large lake and forest. A glowing red pinprick of light blazed beneath his finger. Certain tomes and artifacts in the archive's collection are charmed with divination magic. Accurate kind, I assure you. Their locations are then made traceable. The tome in question is showing up here, to the west of Karkal City. Adwin held back a frown. Okay, what specific kind of old magic is it? What will I be up against? He was back to being vague. Was he still hiding something? To be honest, we aren't sure. Garen sighed and stared at the red marker light on the globe. We don't even know what it looks like. The high restriction archive isn't one we frequent, and the intricacies of its contents haven't been very well documented over the years. This event, he said with distaste, has made that a new priority, but we can't change the past. The magic is from the First Era and was sealed into the archive to prevent its circulation. It's advanced, only of use to more powerful wizards. Given how old it is, it will likely be bound with leather and maybe metal. Adwin clenched at the thin fabric covering her arms. So it was unknown, dangerous magic being used by a powerful wizard in a place she'd never been and would likely take a full season to get to in the first place. The weight of her own probable death seeped into her like a brick, and she wrangled the swell of nerves pushing up through her stomach and into her throat. This would pay the debt. No matter what happened to her, her mother would be safe. That was the goal. It always had been. Why does this all need to be kept a secret, then? Garen looked back at his globe. This is damage control. The Council of Mages wants to relocate our artifacts to other arcane universities, and they would be curious if one of us archivists went on a sudden sabbatical. If we look for even a second like we can't handle what we have, by either asking for help or causing suspicion, they'll have reason to pressure us into complying with their request. Why is that a problem? Well, we can't very well maintain our prestige as the largest archive of arcane resources in the world if that happens. Garen smiled dryly. Our coin needs to come from somewhere. Adwin grunted. She wasn't sure how much she believed him. It was a petty reason to go through all this trouble, but there were few people in this world pettier than people with power. That's about everything we know, Garen said. We have magical provisions prepared to aid you and will arrange for your travel to Atria and Carpal City whenever you're prepared to leave. When can you be ready? Adwin pictured the shop at home. The dark wood walls, the smell of fresh bread as it was brought over from the bakery, her mother behind the counter, leaning forward on her elbows. She gritted her teeth. As soon as possible. Godspeed and have a good evening.
Hello, everybody. Thank you, Sid. So my name is Samuel Burt, and tonight I have the privilege of introducing one of my fellow poets in the MFA program, Christopher Patrick McCormick. Chris's poems are ambitious in their scope and often universal in their voices. Yet these poems remain assuredly rooted in personal details like a pound of andouille sausage spoiling in the backseat of his car, or measuring the ripeness of tomatoes by how they feel against his palm. Likewise, Chris has an incredible way of seamlessly interweaving details like dandelions, wind, and stars with the textures of city life, all with an attitude and attention toward broken chain link and flaking paint that embodies the urban pastoral. That said, the city setting does not limit the range of Chris's voice. While in one poem, a possum speaks words of marsupial wisdom through a hole in the wall at a dive bar, in the next we'll find Chris meditating on starlight while imagining the moment of his birth. In just a moment, you'll be treated to poems which interrogate the scale of our existence. And in that spirit, I want to praise Chris and his work for something I felt after working with him over the last couple semesters. And that's a particular refusal to be satisfied with the language we use to describe our place on earth. I feel a genuine restlessness in Chris's poetry and a constant search for a better means by which to articulate wonder. I see that restlessness in the way Chris examines every shape wind can take and every action it can perform on us and our surroundings. And I see it too in his descriptions of breath, quote, rising and falling in that ancient rhythm. No matter how everyday things like stars and breath and wind can appear, each seemingly banal detail in and around our lives is connected to something cosmic, and Chris's poetry bears witness to that divine significance. Christopher McCormick currently attends the MFA in Creative Writing at Bowling Green State University, where he works as an associate editor for the Mid-American Review and teaches creative writing in English. His work has appeared or is forthcoming in Anti-Heroin Chic, New Note, Progenitor, and Thin Air magazine. Let's hear it for Chris.
Good evening, everybody. Can we please have another round of applause for Sid? Okay, let's read some poems. I'm going to get started with a poem entitled Portrait of Hunger as the Opossum Watching Me Eat Through a Hole in the Wall. Who banished us to this life? Nostalgic for an Eden we'd only dreamed. Hunger, for me, was always a furred thing. Bottomless eyes and night's lengthening teeth. So what if in my voice, the scrape of winter? If my stomach walks dusk-starved streets in search of itself, so what? The procession of ants I saw carry a dinner roll across the sidewalk contains all the devotion I need tonight. At this stale hour, I imagine you'd say something like, did you know that I'm North America's only marsupial? Or, if you make me into a boot, use my fat to cure arthritis. Let life bury you like a landfall of discarded lobster shells. You advise me. If you love something, carry it inside yourself until it grows legs strong enough to leave you and beg its own food. Parting song in autumn. You flitted in on June's two-stepping heels, twisting the grass from sleep, invented new words for need, whose secret meanings danced in me. Then summer's incantations whispered through floors. Clouds didn't float, so much as hang. Faded bed sheets dried in the breeze. Now, birds call to each other in argument or longing. And isn't that how it goes? The timbre of autumn, all windsong and dirge. All night, I dream of pirouetting ochre leaves into dust beneath my feet. Vigil. I'll save some praise for the midnight sun, a candle reflected in burnished silver. The hungry hours between here and dawn, I'll ride them forever. All the cardinal must do is choose which horizon swallows him. If I had wings, I'd burn up too, in a gloaming to call my own, an apocalypse of silence. A quiet where leaves rattle in the thaw of the waning moon, and I await you, my sunrise. Dust theory. Each breath fills our lungs with the dust stars have spewed in their coffin pits. I flattened myself today against the sidewalk in front of my house, palms skyward, and I'll tell you, I could feel the earth forgetting us 1 acre at a time. It reminded me that my mother's first act of love was to expel me into this life, a star herself, collapsing into lidocaine and general anesthesia, the loving gravity of the epidural. On some nights, darkness pantomimes around my bed, while behind my eyes, I recreate the tranquil eons before light crowned us, wondering what it's like to love dirt as old roots do. Today, my mother tells me I'll know my tomatoes are ripe by the way they leap from the vine into my hand, how they need to be held by something they don't understand. Guilty Boy's Creed. When dandelion seeds blow in the crucible of spring, a child is made to confess. When a child confesses, we join the College of Headless Saints. When Dad chops onions on Sunday, we weep hosannas on the dinner plates. When Mom passes out in church, fish stop swimming in the rivers. When the fish stop swimming, we feel the stillness of all creation. When the dues are paid and the tithes collected, the saints strip down to their bones. When the day finally sheds its luster, we taste the streetlights misfiring beneath our tongues. And when God comes down the stairs, we hit the lights and pretend we're sleeping. I think it's Mountain Dew time. Imitating wind. I chase you through these streets, growing thinner and thinner. Search for you among the kinked picket fences of my childhood, all the usual hiding places where I thought I could never be found. The paint chips away to reveal the parched wood underneath, and in that peeling, a bramble-throated song in the shape of a bowl. And so, my hands assume a posture of begging instead of prayer. I don't have the face of an apostle. These hands will never feel the weight of meaning. They write words that weigh nothing at all, like the wind that whispers to my heart like an old friend, even while it pleases me. And in that voice, I find you, lover, priest, pet, trying your hardest to burst into flowers and failing. Paradise. Stark naked, under a tree, your pink body a peach swaddled in the earth's glowing green. Did you ever think how the apple tree grows from you and not from anywhere else? Did you feel the wild dog lick the ditch of your arm? Nature is both ours and not. In silence, soil soaks blood. Its love is that all colors must fade. But for a little while, apples weigh down the branches, give you an almost beating heart to hold with your two hands. Summer bones. Those winter mornings when it seemed that all it took to heat an old house was laughter, lengthening bones and notches on the doorpost. Those winters were so sharp they could have lived in the bones through endless summers. We went on growing anyway, like the roots of an old tree reaching for the nearest river. Tucker Woods. There are spells in the eaves as deer come to drink at this pond and be blessed by silence. Just as often, the voice you thought you heard call out to you was only a faint rustling of leaves or the scraping of your foot against dead wood. You love the wisdom of trees, how each death nourishes the rest. Among these leaning oaks, you needn't look up to know what swirls above you, or down to know what swims beneath your feet, or to know that everything falls into itself in one rapturous wailing. Trying to name it is like trying to find that voice you heard once, billowing over grasses. It's in the crack of acorns beneath your feet, the withered throat of autumn. Not feeling it. The liquor is the same in every state. Dust collects in the lacquered skin of fish mounted to the wall of this by-the-minute flea-bag motel. Their petrified smiles seem to say, it does no good to name the trees. Nothing stirs the tablecloth in the corner nook. The spider in the kitchen builds its web, and we move through time, the two of us, but I can't feel it. Adrift. April storms walk in without taking their boots off. I close my eyes, let lightning flash inside me. Its love is charred wood and branches lying in the mud. Yes, it's been a year of dog breath, hissing through the slats of fences, of rain beating the scent of lilies into the air, a scent that could ruin me. We plant flowers so they'll weep our cares into their fruitless beds. That is our agreement, our love. In weather like this, I'll need more than wings to keep from falling. At any moment, a wind could come and drop me on the reaching grasses. Its love is that it weaves a song through all my empty spaces. My love is that I hum along with it. The spaciousness of want. Hope comes diving through this empty sky. From these rooms, a little light. Empty bowls, sparse, but for the debris of lightning and trees. The storms inside spider webs. The figs of hunger rewarded with the heavy clouds, borrowed time, silence, and promise. Hope comes from these empty bowls, lightning and trees, the figs of borrowed time. Diving through rooms, sparse, but for the storms inside. Hunger rewarded with silence, and this empty sky, a little light, the debris of spider webs, the heavy clouds promise. The music of leaving. Each moment is a birth, a fresh tear in the screen door, left swinging on a rush-lit afternoon. Creaking wood may signify an ending. The moment a flame burns through its oxygen and fades. Whoever passes through is forgotten then in a singing of hinges, a rasp of air. Maybe someone who's gone is remembered only by the trees, whose gaze makes hairs of the arms straighten, like a chill wind whispering through brown autumn grasses. Maybe there is no good way to record the music of leaving, whose instruments are a gloaming sky and the faithful progress of rust. Okay, 2 more poems to go. This one is called Nocturne. Nocturne. This world began as breath, moving over untamed silence. Breath coalesced into longing and took shape as these words. At night, stars shine through our window, breathing themselves out of existence. And after a day spent wandering between market stalls, where you bought a pound of andouille that spoiled on the drive home, you sleep next to me, your body rising and falling in that ancient rhythm. Didn't the same breath bother a wheat field in 1890? Goose pimple my arms as I waited for the bus to 4th grade. In that moment, I can feel the enamored gaze of this hour, the silent conquest of roots as they search the nearest water, the street where we live reduced, finally, to nothing but a name. And I know that I begin, and begin again, in your every placid breath. Okay, this one's called No Storm in Particular. We were walking while the sky deepened into pink. You said, how can anyone look at this world and claim that it's fallen? All year, I've been harvesting earthworms, only to ball them up into another promise, lighter than the air the finches swim in, their feathers drifting like the acid ashes of another century. Some people might call that grace. Others might say it's the swaddling of rain that holds our lives together. The irises, with their little yellow tongues, how they seem to invent themselves over and over. And before anything else, I'd have you hold on to belief for another day. Before everything we've built or could hope to build continues fading. I'd have the fields keep turning to mud every spring when the dandelions wake and drink their fill of the season's hopes. That's it.
Whoa, Sid, who's your fashion icon?
Is it me?
Sid, what designer are you wearing?
What does, I'm, okay, the shoes and the skirt are from some Depop girlies, the tights are from Kroger's. The belt is from Amazon, unfortunately. This sweater is from a place called Wildflower Boutique in Yellow Springs, Ohio, which is a baller town. You guys should go there. They got some cool shit going on down there. And this choker is from Theodosia's Trinkets on Etsy. Looks cool stuff. Sorry for all that.
And then Chris, what's your outfit?
It's Target and H&M.
Fast fashion is terrible. Bad. Don't go there.
Jen.
Yeah, Sid, I was wondering if you wouldn't mind just talking a little bit about, like, you're such a rich world builder in all of your stories and all of your works. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that process and maybe also how it's connected to you as a visual artist.
Yeah, so world building, I've been working on this like specific world for like since I was in, I want to say like 5th grade. It's gone through a lot of changes. So like, yeah, how do I do world building? Good question. Oh man. I kind of just like come up with stuff that sounds cool, or like if I see something or read something that's cool and think that I could maybe like tweak it a little bit or take inspiration from it for my own thing. A lot of the current like thing I'm working on is inspired by D&D. not all the way inspired by D&D, because D&D sucks in a lot of ways, especially in the world building sense. They kind of have a lot of problems. I guess I'm just fixing them to the best of my ability. Yeah. Did you ask like another question in there that I forgot?
Oh, no, you're good. Could you talk a little bit about how that's connected to you as a visual artist?
Oh,
Are those
yeah.
things connected at all?
Kinda. I just like to draw stuff, and it helps me to like visualize them on the paper when I draw, or the tablet when I do digital art.
Chris,
Yeah.
where do you start with a poem? Or like, what are your consistent start with? Is it like an image, an idea? Like, where are you coming from?
It's just a line, and I think about it a lot until something comes out of it. That's it. No. Yeah.
What was the line for the poem about possum then in that case?
It was who banished us to this life. Yeah, the first line.
What, say it again?
Who banished us to this life?
This is for Chris. You managed to make a lot of your really urban settings seem just as natural as the outdoors. How do you do that?
I spent a lot of time there. That's all I know.
This question's for both of you. Who are your favorite like writers and inspiration? Or like if you just want to like read for fun, who do you turn to?
Okay, I have not honestly read for fun in a very long time, which is kind of sad. Over the summer while I was doing the first draft of my novel, I read Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo, which is pretty good. I have my issues with it, but I can't I'm not gonna lie, it did help me get out of writer's block a few times. So that's cool.
I'm in the midst of an obsession with the poet Larry Levis. Which I think like a lot of people will hear about.
Is there another poet?
Yeah, Lee Young Lee. I'm too nervous to think of any other one.
Any other poets you know that have names that both start with L?
Yeah, but I don't before you with them.
Is it Philip Levine?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, who's got a real question?
Not a real question right here.
This question, what challenges do you face when having to create your own world in fantasy?
A lot of it is figuring out how things work like logistically. I honestly prefer to make worlds in fantasy because I really don't know that much about this one that we already live in. So it's easier for me to just like make whatever up. Logistic problems are a big issue, like figuring out like, oh, does this actually make sense? How would this really work? Are these people acting normally or like a person would act in the situation? Figuring out justifications for things is the biggest issue, but sometimes I just sit around and like rubber duck my roommate or my stuffed animals, I don't know, and just figure it out by talking out loud.
Chris, your poems approach these moments of what we might not consider beauty, like chipped paint and empty lots, with a lot of compassion. How do you connect with those images and make them transcend?
Yeah, I grew up in like that kind of environment, like I was saying before, urban Rust Belt, kind of past its prime environment, a lot of closed stores and stuff like that, and feeling pain. I feel like I just, everybody searches for beauty and like has this desire to find beauty in their world, and I just, was very stubborn in my pursuit to find beauty in what surrounded me.
Last call for questions, all right.